Welcome back to my new video. This video, we are going to build the gateway service. Okay, so this gateway service is the one that is going to validate our token, our JWT token. And then once the token is validated, then we'll have access to our predict endpoint. And that predict endpoint, we are going to produce a data to the input topic. So once we produce data to the input topic, the prediction service is going to consume that message, make prediction out of it, and then write the model prediction back to the output topic. So basically, that is what the gateway service is going to be doing. It's going to be validating our token, okay? Once it's valid, then we produce message to the input topic in the Kafka cluster. So let's go to our PyCharm IDE. I'm going to create a new directory, which I'm going to call Gateway SVC. Within this folder, I'm going to create a whole bunch of files and packages. So let's start with the packages. So I'm going to create the first package. We're going to call it auth. The next package, we're going to call it auth underscore SVC. The next one, we're going to create another package called Kafka Producer. Okay. And the rest is going to be just files. So the first one, we're going to look at the requirements.txt. We're going to create, let me see, the Docker file. And we're going to add the build.sh. And then finally, we're going to look at the main Python file, which we are going to call it api.py. That's what we are going to call it. So we're going to start with the requirement.txt file, which I've already created. So I'm going to paste in what I need in that file. So I'm going to get rid of some of them. We're not going to be using the schema registry, but let me comment that out because we don't need it. Let me see. So we only need the flags, Kafka Python, and then the request, probably. So that's all we need in this file. So with the Docker file, it's also going to be very simple. So I'm going to paste that in. As usual, we are exposing the port 1958, and then we're running the api.py file, which is this one. So let's start with the auth package. We're going to create a file called validate. And within this validate token, I'm also going to paste in the code and I'll explain what is going on. Yeah, so we created a function called token, and it's using the request as a parameter. And we're checking the headers. If authorization is not part of the headers, we want to throw this message, missing credentials. And if authorization is part of the headers, we want to grab that token. And if there's no any token, we want to create this error message. But once we have a token, we want to make a post request using the request library. And then we are pointing to auth service address, which we are going to grab from the environment variable. And then the endpoint is, I think we created the endpoint in the other auth service to be, let me see. Validate is what? API version 1 and validate. So we're going to pass in API /v1.0/validate. Okay. So basically, this is just pointing to the auth service address, which we are going to put in the config map. Okay. So I'm going to show you what this will look like. So don't get worried about it. So once we hit that endpoint and then we get a response, we want to check the status code if it's 200. If it's 200, we want to return the text. Else, we want to respond with a none and then the text and then the status code. Okay. So basically, this is what the auth package is doing, which is the validate. Okay. With the auth service package, we want to have access to the login. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file, which I'm going to call access.py. Then once I paste in the login, you see the other one was validate, okay, and it's the function called token. And then the access is called login, okay, and it's also doing the same thing. We are checking the authorization from the request, and if it's not auth, we want to return missing credentials. And then here we're grabbing the username and the password from that auth object, and then we pass the basic auth through this post request. And you can see that because we are in a container or we are in a Kubernetes clusters, this is how we want to grab that service address. And I think the endpoint is API /v1.0/login. Okay. And then we pass in the auth, basic auth. And that is also going to return a response. And then we check the status code. If it's 200, we return the text. Okay. Else we return none, and then this text and then the status code. So basically it's very straightforward. We can decide to copy all this and put it here rather than defining a new variable here, but it's okay. It doesn't hurt. So basically that is it. So next is the Kafka producer. Okay. So the Kafka producer, I'm going to create that one also, but I'm going to create a new file and call it producer. Okay. And I'm going to paste the code in and then clean up some few info that we don't need. Okay. We don't need, we could grab the environment variable, but it's okay. Okay, so I think that is the end of the cleanup exercise. Let me ignore this as well. Let me clean up a lot of stuff that we don't need. Okay, so I think I need to clean up a bit more. Okay, so I think this is a bit clean. Okay, so these are our imports, and then we have a logger defined, and then we want to create, this is our Kafka topic, input topic, as we saw. And then the bootstrap service, we are grabbing that from the environment variable. which we are going to store in the config map. Okay, we are grabbing this information from the config map. So I'll show you where you can get that information. So once we do that, we create, this is our producer, Kafka producer. And we pass in the Bootstrap server. And then once we do that, we define another function called produce. We pass in the data. So once we call the producer object, we call the send function. That is where we make use of our input topic and then dump the data. And then we encode it using the UTF-8. Okay, then we sleep for 1 second and then we keep producing data. Okay, so basically that is it for our producer. Okay. Once we do that, the next thing we're going to do is the API file. So what we're going to be doing here is that we are doing imports using the flags. We're importing from this package, Kafka producer. We want to import that produce function, as well as the access and validate functions. Okay, and this is our logger, and then our flags class, which we are assigning to this object called app. Once we do that, we want to create 2 endpoints. Okay. These 2 endpoints. The first one is the login endpoint. So we're going to call it API/v1.o/login. Okay. So we are making use of access.login. And then we pass in the request that is coming from the flags package. Okay, so this is going to return 2 information, the token and error. So if there's no error, we want to just return the token. And if there is an error, we return that error. So that is the endpoint we are looking at. So let me call this main and then pass in app.run and then pass in the host 0.0.0.0. And then we pass in, let's say, debug is equal to true. We don't do this in production. So this is only for development scenario. Okay. And then the port that we are looking at is 1958. Okay. You can choose any port of your choice, any number that you feel like. Okay. So the next endpoint we are looking at is the predict endpoint. Okay. So I'm going to paste that in. Okay. So the predict endpoint, I'm going to pass in API v1.o/predict. Okay. So what is happening here is that once we call the validate.token and then we pass in the request, it's going to return a response and an error, as we saw here in the validate. Okay, it's going to return some text and then a none. Okay. Once it does that, if there's an error, we want to return that error. Else, we want to load that response object with the JSON.loads function. Okay, and then we store that in the RESP object. Okay, so this is a dictionary. It comes out as a dictionary. Okay, and as part of that dictionary, we want to check if this is true. Admin has the value of true. Okay, so if this is true, and if the request method is a post request, we want to grab that JSON, okay, and then store that in the payload, and then we want to send this information to the Kafka topic, but that is going to be in the logger. It's going to print to the screen. And then here we're going to call the produce function, which is coming from the Kafka. Let me see, where is it? It's coming from this side, okay? This function. We want to call that function and pass in our data, okay? Once we pass in the data, then we log another information and say, well, data sent to predictor successfully, okay? And then we get out of that if, and then we return payload sent success, and then a status code of 200. Else, we want to say not authorized, and then we send the 401 status code, okay? So basically, that is all for our gateway service. And the next thing that I'm going to add to this is the manifest file. Manifest for our Kubernetes. So the first thing we are going to be looking at is the config map. So I'm going to create a new config map. File config map.yaml. Then I'm going to paste the code in. So this is a config map. And then the name is what? Gateway config map. And then the variable that we are looking at here is the input Kafka, which is called input Kafka. And then the output Kafka topic is output Kafka. You can call it whatever you want. And also the Bootstrap server that we were talking about, we actually stored it. You see, where is the producer? You see, this is where we're grabbing that Bootstrap server, okay? So we stored it here. Okay. So this is the name of that Kafka cluster. And then this is the namespace that we are looking at, model-microservice. Okay. And that auth service address is auth, and it's running on port 5000. Okay. So we are referring to that name, okay? That name which is declared here. Where is the deployment? Okay, this name, we are referring to this name here. Okay, and we name that also for the same name for the service. Okay, that is what we are referring to, given this port. Okay, so don't get confused. I don't think we need the schema registry for this purpose, but in the future, I might want to handle the schema registry. Okay, so this is what we are referring to. So auth 5000. So let me see what it's going to look like. So it's going to be, it's going to look like this: http://auth:5000/API v1.o/login. So this is what the final URL is going to look like, but we don't want to hard code this part. Okay, so we are grabbing that from the config map. Okay, so that is what is happening here. So that is how services interact within Kubernetes clusters. Okay, so you refer to the name. Okay, you can just refer to the name, and it's going to resolve the name into whatever IP address that Kubernetes pod is using. Okay, so I think that is that. I'm going to leave this here so that once we are reviewing the code, you can understand what is going on here. I think the config map part is done. The next thing I'm going to look at is the deployment dot YAML. I'm also going to paste that code in. Okay, so I've pasted that code in, and the kind is for deployment, and the name is for gateway. The image we are going to be looking at is the gateway service v1.2.0. You can decide on the tag you want to give to that container. Okay, doesn't matter here. And here the container port we are looking at is for 1958. And we are referencing the configuration map or the config map, as well as the secret. If we have anything stored in the secret service, we are referencing that. So let me create a service. Service.yaml. And with the service, it's going to be straightforward as before. Okay, so the service name is what? Gateway. And then the target port is 1958. And then the service port is also 1958. Okay, running on the TCP protocol. Okay, so basically that is it. Nothing complicated here. And the last thing we are going to look at is the secret.yaml. Okay, if we have anything stored that is sensitive, we can put it in the secret service. Okay, but here we don't have anything stored, so I'm just going to put a placeholder as none. Okay, so we don't need it actually. So that is all for, okay, I think the build.sh, we need to put in our, how to build our Docker image. It's going to be the same as before, nothing complicated. So I think that is it. This is the image name and then the version. And then we're pushing that image to the Docker Hub registry. Okay, already we know about the Docker file as well as the requirements.txt. Okay, so that is all for this service. The service gateway is done. So I'm going to end the video here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Once we're done creating all the services, I'll show you how you can build your images, push it to Docker registry, deploy it to Kubernetes, and test it finally. Okay, so this is our second service. I'll see you in the last service. Okay, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.